It's summer vacation in Penguin Village, and Akane and the gang talk about what they plan to do on their break. True to character, Sukutsun is going to train in martial arts, Obacha-man is going to work to earn money for the kitty's food, and Pisuke is going to do his homework, all things that disgust Akane. Then Taro and Tsururin come by to announce they're on a date, and of course Arale and the Gachan are going to play giant monsters, and all the while Senbei and the other adults show up to flash the V sign because they're excited about being in Shonen Jump again after so long. And then Goku and General Blue show up because, oh yeah, this is Dragon Ball. Chapter 81 begins 3 weeks of the infamous Dragon Ball Dr. Slump crossover. It opens in a very interesting way because this chapter goes on for 5 pages without any indication that it's Dragon Ball at all. It's only after Arale spots Goku and Blue that we even get a title page. I have to imagine this was quite a treat for fans of the time, opening their weekly Shonen Jump and seemingly having traveled through time, seeing Toriyama's previous series in his current series' place. And Chapter 81 is also special because it's the first of only 2 chapters in the entire series that's in full color for its duration. All other colored chapters are in full color only for the first few pages before reverting to a limited color red and gray style, so just the fact that the extra effort was put in indicates that this was a big event. However, based on my experience, this is usually seen as one of the most controversial sections of Dragon Ball. And once again, it's usually a matter of retroactive judgment. People who are familiar with the more serious and more developed aspects of later Dragon Ball see the Dr. Slump world as completely incompatible with Dragon Ball's world. And such accusations aren't without merit. Even in its early forms, Dragon Ball is less zany than Dr. Slump, and it's no small decision to cross over one fictional world with another because you're basically saying that anything that happens in one series happens in another. To take a very famous example, there was that little issue with Dallas and its spin-off Knots Landing. At some point in Dallas, they decided to kill off Bobby Ewing, which was a big deal to the continuity of both shows. Then, a year later, Dallas decided that that was a bad idea and decreed that the whole season had been a dream and Bobby was still alive. But Knots Landing had spent that entire year developing its storyline under the assumption that Bobby was actually dead, and they didn't want it to be a dream. And those aren't even 2 previously unrelated shows that crossed over. They were specifically created to exist in the same world. But after that point, they just said, screw it, and continued Knots Landing as some kind of alternate reality because they really didn't have a choice. In this case, Toriyama probably didn't go into Dragon Ball thinking, this is going to take place in the same world as Dr. Slump. Most likely at some point he just thought, wouldn't it be neat if Goku and Arale got to fight a bad guy together? And there probably wasn't much thought as to whether it made sense. And at the time, I contend it wasn't even that big of a deal. Sure, in Dr. Slump, the sun had a face, and Arale could literally crack the earth, and characters in Dragon Ball had actually made reference to Dr. Slump as a work of fiction, but then again, the characters in Dragon Ball have made reference to themselves being works of fiction, which will continue even in the final arc of the series, and Yamcha has literally broken the 4th wall. Dr. Slump was referenced by the Toriyama robot in the 3rd chapter, and as has already been said, at several points in this very chapter, the characters have made reference to the fact that they're in a comic book. But then there's the fact that Dr. Slump uses the Gregorian calendar while Dragon Ball uses its own system, which again won't be introduced for another several years. But that's barely an issue, as different cultures in our own world use different calendar systems. A bit harder to reconcile is Dr. Slump's referencing of real-world locations that don't exist in Dragon Ball. I've heard some people make the argument that the Dr. Slump characters we see here must be alternate versions that live in the Dragon Ball world, not the actual characters from Dr. Slump, and use that to explain away all the things from actual Dr. Slump that supposedly wouldn't make sense. Well, I can't get behind that because I find it defeats the whole purpose behind the crossover. People wanted to see the characters they knew and loved, not some kind of bargain basement replacements. And then there's the simple fact that they reference that they've been in Shonen Jump before. I think it's intended to be the actual characters. Then there's the idea that this area on the map contains an entrance to a parallel universe that both Blue and Goku happen to enter. I personally find that the most probable. Otherwise, I find myself wondering what happens to Penguin Village near the end of the series when bad things happen to the Earth. To sum up, though, I think it's a bit head-scratching, but it's not that difficult to make work. Just don't take your Dragon Ball too seriously. It's really not. Crazy and wacky things happen throughout. Here in this very arc, we have a guy comically stabbed to death with spears talking to his superior as a gag, while in just a few chapters from now we'll have a character stabbed to death with a spear, and it's taken very seriously. The entire Majin Buu arc jumps back and forth between gags and tragedy, so it's not that Dr. Slump is introducing things that just don't make any sense into the logical, tonally consistent world of Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball's world is already wacky and silly at its core, even when it's serious, so just go along with it. So ultimately, after some cat and mouse, Goku and Blue get separated from each other, but both end up at the Norimaki household as Goku needs to go there to get his Dragon Radar fixed again, and Blue goes there to steal a plane. Sinbei is completely baffled by the device, but his genius son Turbo fixes it instantly and gives his dad the credit. When Blue sees that Goku is already there, he decides to use strategy by taking Arale hostage. Then he uses his telekinesis to hold Goku in place, steals the Dragon Radar, and decides to shish kebab him with a tree. But before he can, Sinbei, who understands the danger, tells Arale, who does not, to use her pro wrestling moves on Blue, which she does. And now Blue is gone. Goku is incredulous that Arale is so strong, and upon being told that the Gachans and Obachaman are really strong too, Goku decides he needs to really buckle down. Goku manages to retrieve the Dragon Balls from the plane, but Blue had been holding the Dragon Radar when Arale made him go away, so that's a really big problem. But Turbo remembers the construction of the device and uses parts of the plane to create a new identical replacement. So it's a bit hard to hand-wave this crossover as having never happened when, presumably, the Dragon Radar that's used for the rest of the series was created by a Dr. Slump character, and the original is shown to be used by the Red Ribbon Army and is never recovered. But with the day saved and Blue out of the picture, Goku bids his new friends a fond farewell. And that was fun. Obviously, being familiar with Dr. Slump makes it more enjoyable than if you have no idea who these people are. Arale's a robot. Otherwise, you end up feeling like you missed something pretty important, but even if you don't, it's still a bunch of fun characters adding a new twist to the action. Goku doesn't even bother to go back to his friends and let them know what happened. Instead, he continues on directly to the next Dragon Ball, which is already being sought after by Colonel Yellow. We find ourselves in the Holy Karting Sanctuary, home to a massively tall tower, guarded by an honorable native who doesn't care about the ball, but refuses to let his land be plundered. The native, who will learn is named Bora, dispatches the Red Ribbon operatives quite brutally. In fact, this is by far the most realistic violence that has ever been depicted in Dragon Ball up to this point, and is perhaps indicative of the tonal shift that is already beginning to take place. Yellow survives and flees while Bora buries the dead. Upon contacting headquarters, Yellow is given an ultimatum: get the ball, or Red will hire Tao Pai Pai, the assassin, who will get the job done and kill Yellow for his failure. We don't know who Tao Pai Pai is, but just seeing Yellow's and Black's reactions to the name is enough to know that he's trouble. Yellow comes up with the plan of swooping his plane in low and kidnapping Bora's young son Upa. It almost works, but Goku shows up right at that moment and takes out Yellow with no trouble, leading Red to announce it's time to bring in Tao Pai Pai. We also see that sweet little Upa is able to ride the Kintoon with no trouble. Upa and Bora are a rather extreme example of a device Toriyama likes to use quite often in Dragon Ball, a duo consisting of a little guy and a big guy. We've already seen it before with examples like Yamcha and Puar and Red and Black, and we're going to see it many more times with characters like Piccolo and Piano, Nappa and Vegeta, and Shin and Kibito. But I don't think any are quite as extreme as this. I mean, Upa's the size of Bora's head. At Red Ribbon HQ, Blue finally manages to make it back from where Arale sent him, and severely punishes a guard who doesn't recognize him. And he happens to make it back right after Tao Pai Pai has arrived. He claims he usually charges 100 million zenny for each kill, but since it's his 20th anniversary special, he's charging only half price. Blue walks in the door and Red is so disgusted at his failure despite bringing the radar that he decides to test Pai Pai's skills on Blue, but if Blue wins, he's allowed to live. However, the assassin makes quick work of Blue, killing him with his tongue. Good night, gay Nazi. And like Jackie Chun and Yamcha in the last arc, our new big antagonist shows how powerful he is by easily taking out our last big antagonist. So, yeah, Yellow was nothing more than a red herring antagonist. After all, Goku just made his way through 2 generals, and now he's facing a colonel again? No, this is Tao Pai Pai's section of the story. And he's just crazy. He travels by throwing a pillar and riding it to his destination, and the words "kill you" are written on the back of his clothes. And interestingly enough, his name means peach white white, so even though he's not part of the Red Ribbon Army, he still follows the pattern. Unlike Murasaki, Tao Pai Pai is meant to be evocative of the Chinese, so Toriyama gave him a Chinese-esque name. Back at karting, Goku finds that this is his grandfather's Sushinshu, which means his quest should be over right now. Despite the fact that this is the Red Ribbon Army arc, everything about Goku's quest so far hasn't really been about them. He's been coming into conflict with them because they're both looking for Dragon Balls, but Goku's quest has only been to get this one ball, not necessarily to defeat the Red Ribbon Army. As I said in the first part, his ball obviously couldn't have been the first ball he found, but it's just as unbelievable that it would happen to be the last, too. So something has to come along to keep the story going and ensure that Goku does have an ultimate showdown against his foes. Maybe by this point Goku would have kept going just to make sure the Red Ribbon Army didn't attempt to subjugate any more people. We'll never know for sure because Tao Pai Pai arrives to kill Goku, and when Bora steps in to defend the savior of his son, Tao Pai Pai kills him with his own spear. And now, for the first time in the series, we see Goku confronted with a foe that he has absolutely no chance against. Tao Pai Pai kicks him around effortlessly, and the best Goku can do is tear up his clothes. And that just makes Pai Pai so mad he fires his own beam attack, the Dodonpa, that seemingly kills Goku instantly. It's hard to believe that just a few chapters ago we were engaged in Dr. Slump antics. Tao Pai Pai takes the balls and goes on his way, even managing to blow back the rock that an anguished Appa throws at him. Appa buries his father, but as he's about to do the same for Goku, it turns out he's alive. And as the Sushinshu rolls out of his torn gi, precisely where the Kame kanji was, we learn why. The ball blocked the attack. His grandpa saved him. And as he sees Bora's grave, Goku makes up his mind to gather the rest of the Dragon Balls and use his wish to bring Bora back to life. Goku realizes that Tao Pai Pai will be back for the last ball and knows he can't defeat him the way he is now. But before Tao Pai Pai had shown up, Bora had explained the legend of the tower. At the top there is said to be a martial arts master who would bestow upon one who climbed to the top a magical elixir, the Cho Seisui, or Super Holy Water, that would grant immense strength. So Goku decides to climb the tower to get stronger. And while this is the first of many instances of strength being gained by a character in a very short amount of time, as opposed to the hard work we saw during the training with the Muten Roshi, there is an extremely mythic quality about the hero going through a trial to meet a divine figure who will give him what he needs to overcome his obstacles. And as we will see, it ultimately subverts that expectation anyway. Meanwhile, Tao Pai Pai has stopped at a tailor to get a new set of clothes when Red informs him that he missed the ball. Luckily for Goku and Appa, Pai Pai agrees to return in 3 days after his clothes are completed, and Red is fine with that as there is no hurry now that Son Goku is dead. Even with his incredible jumping skills, it still takes Goku until the next morning to reach the top of Carding Tower. There he meets Carding Sennin, a large talking cat. But we know he's a Sennin because he has a cool staff. He reads Goku's mind to discover why he desires increased strength. He points Goku in the direction of the Super Holy Water, but when Goku tries to take it, Karin attacks. It seems he'll have to take it from Karin. While Karin is the next in what will be a long line of elderly mentor characters to Goku, Karin is definitely more in the vein of the trickster mentor. He does comment to Goku that he's wasting his movements, and when Goku comments that he's hungry, Karin introduces the Senzu, a holy bean that will fill up its eater for 10 solid days. Goku is skeptical, but it satiates even his bottomless appetite. However, it doesn't help him get the Super Holy Water any more easily. After a while, Goku takes a break and asks Karin if anyone else had climbed the tower. Karin replies someone did 300 years ago, and that he himself is around 800. When Goku asks who it was, Karin replies that it was the Muten Roshi, and that it took him 3 years to get the water. Later on, Goku tries to fake out Karin with the Zanzo Ken, but Karin fakes him out too, although he does admit to himself he's never seen anyone create as many fake images before. Karin decides Goku's lungs need more conditioning than the high altitude has already given them, so he just throws the Dragon Ball off the tower, forcing Goku to make the journey all over again. He's terribly angry, but Karin points out that while it had taken him a whole day before, Goku has just made the round trip in 3 hours. During the night, Goku almost attempts to steal the water while Karin is sleeping, but decides against it. Karin, who was feigning sleep anyway, muses over how much more honest Goku is than his mentor was. 2 days later, with the help of some tickling, Goku finally manages to snag the water and drink his reward. But he doesn't feel any different afterwards. Karin admits that he shouldn't, as it's only ordinary rainwater. Goku is horrified, thinking he's been tricked, but Karin just laughs and says that Goku is already many times stronger than he was before. It was the training that was important, not the water. And that's what makes this section with Karin feel much more rewarding than other mystical mentors who offer instant power-ups. Goku still had to work for his reward. He had to learn. He had to overcome his own presumptions several times. His disbelief that Karin could be a martial arts master, his skepticism that a Senzu could fill him up, and his insistence that a magical elixir was more valuable than good old-fashioned hard work. So when Goku heads back down to confront Tao Pai Pai once more, and Karin thinks to himself that Goku may have outstripped even the Muten Roshi himself, we believe him.